everyone, Sabrina here from Scrappy Tales Crafts, and today I'll be showing you the first 5 cards that I created with the Hero Arts February 2020 card kit. So here I'm just going to quickly show you what came in the kit. You get this birthday themed stamp set, and then the coordinating dies that die cut out some of the images from the background stamps in the stamp set. You also get a fancy cake die, you get some lacquer pens, and then some sequins. So I really enjoyed working with this kit. I was very low on birthday cards, so I was pretty happy that it was a birthday theme. So for card 1, I'm going to take the background stamp that comes in the stamp set, and I'm going to put it in my Misty and ink it up with my Versamark ink. And I didn't want the cupcakes on this card. I actually want this to be a wedding card. So I went ahead and covered those cupcakes up with a scrap piece of paper, that way they wouldn't be inked up. And then I just stamped it onto this cream cardstock that I cut to 4 by 5 1/4 inches. And now I'm sprinkling white embossing powder over the background stamp. And then I will just heat set that. And as I'm heat setting it, you can see that it's very light. It's not hardly visible at all, but it's there, and as I start to color, you can kind of see the shapes come alive. So I thought to color in my images for my 10 cards, I thought I would use my colored pencils just because I haven't used them in a while, and I wanted to practice with them. And these images were so tiny that I felt like my markers would completely bleed outside the lines, even with the embossing powder, so I opted for my colored pencils, and I'm going to show you how I colored half of this stamp since the other half is the same. And for each of these images, I'm using 2 pencils. So you can see right now I'm working on a few of the leaves, and I laid down my darkest color towards the base of the leaves where they stem off from the stem, and then I will go over that with my lighter pencil. And since the images are so small, you don't really have to do much blending. Typically when I use my color pencils, I like the way that they look without Gamma-Sol or without the blending pencil, so I normally don't blend excessively because I do like that textured look that the pencils give. So like I said, I wanted this to be a wedding card, so I'm sticking to green, white, and pink. So here you can see as I color this larger flower, you can really start to see the shape pop out of the background. And I did like how the colored pencils and the white embossing powder looked very soft and kind of lacy, which is exactly what I wanted for this card since it is a wedding themed card. But at a distance, it kind of just looks like green and pink specks. Unless you're looking at it up close like you are now, you really can't tell what the images are. So if I were to do it again, I'd probably use silver embossing powder, maybe even black, just so that you can see what the background stamp looks like more. But I don't hate this card. I was a little disappointed because this card did take an hour to create, and it's a little disheartening when you have an idea in your head and it's just not exactly how you pictured it. And this was the first card I created out of the 10, so after this point I didn't feel like making any more cards. So I did step aside, I ate lunch, and then I came back to making more cards. But that's just what happens. It doesn't always work out. And now that I'm looking at it, it looks fine. I mean, odds are the couple that I give this to will be looking at it pretty close up and they're gonna see the background stamp. But yeah, if I were to do it again, I would probably use silver embossing powder. I think that would be really pretty. All right, so I'm only gonna show you, like I said, half this image. So off camera, I'm going to color the rest. Apparently my cat wanted to say hi. Hi, Felix. Okay, and off camera I did white heat emboss and color in some more of the individual flowers from the background stamp, and now I'm going to die cut them out. You can see that the dies only cut one of the two flowers from the background stamp because one of the flowers is flipped vertically, so it's only going to cut one of the two. And that's what I'm realizing here. You can see with this die, it's not going to cut that one flower out, but it will cut this one. So I was glad that I noticed that now, so going forward, I knew which flowers to stamp out. And then also I die cut the cake that came in the die set. I decided to cut off the candles because I wanted this to be a wedding cake. And then I'm going to arrange the flowers that I die cut out earlier. I did, again, stamp and color them on the cream cardstock that's in the background, just so that everything coordinated. And then here I wanted this to be a 3-tiered cake, so I cut out another white cake and I just cut the top tier, and then I trimmed off the sides a little bit to make it a little smaller, and then I just added that to the top of the cake to create a 3-tiered cake. So I'm just going to attach that behind the second tier, and then I decided to die cut a silver platter or serving tray just to help that stand out. And then I'm going to start gluing down my flowers. I thought that I would want to add these pink pom-poms, but I decided, I don't know, I think I decided against these and just stuck with the flowers. So I'm going to attach all of them with my art glitter glue. And then I'll put one more down on the left corner there. And then I'm going to place it right in the center of my background stamp. And here you can kind of tell what I mean by from a distance it doesn't look like much. To me it kind of looks like wallpaper. That's why I was a little disappointed with this card. Maybe it was the cream cardstock, but I think it was the white embossing powder. You can see that I went around the edges with my vintage photo just to try to make those background images pop out more. And then I took some vellum and I'm going to white heat emboss the sentiment celebrate. I love that this sentiment can work for birthday, wedding, baby shower, pretty much any sort of party occasion. Okay, so I'm only going to add glue behind the celebrate sentiment since you can see glue behind vellum. I'm trying to hide it behind that sentiment. I'm also going to wrap the ends behind this panel, so I'm going to just fold them over, add some art glitter glue, and attach those to the back. And then I'm going to pop up my cake using some U-line foam tape here. So I'll peel off the backing and then pop that up right over my sentiment. And that will pretty much complete the card. I'm just going to attach it to my A2 card base, which I created with some 110-pound white Nina cardstock. I'm trying to use up my Spellbinders double-sided tape, so I will be using that for all 10 cards. So I'll just attach that, and that will complete card number 1. So let me know what you guys think. Am I being too hard on myself? I do like how it turns out. I really love the cake. Like I said, I would just change up a few things with the background. Here's a close-up. Moving on to card 2, I'm going to take out my zigs. I chose some purples, blues, and pinks, and I'm just going to scribble them onto this Bristol cardstock that I cut to 4 by 5 1/4 inches. And then I'm going to take my Wink of Stella brush that is actually filled with perfect pearls in the color gold. I tried to resemble the pen as much as possible, so I chose gold. But anyway, I'm using that to spread the color around. And I'm using quite a bit of water here. You can see my paper is kind of peeling, but it's not a huge deal. I just wipe those specks off once the panel is dry. I'm just trying to create a little cloud that's going to go behind my cake. For a few of the colors, I will go back over them with the marker because the zigs do fade out quite a bit once you add water to them. And I'm not making sure to blend it perfectly. Like I said, it is part of the background. So I'm pretty happy with that spread of color. So I'm going to die cut out my cake, and I'm going to die cut it from some white cardstock. I'm pretty sure all of the cakes for my 10 cards are cut from white cardstock as the base, and then I just add extra colors on top. So I wanted to decorate this cake, so I did again give the cake a silver platter, and then I'm going to die cut the ribbons from the cake from some colored cardstock, and I tried to find some cardstock that matched the markers that I used in the background. And then I'll just attach those ribbons to the cake with my art glitter glue. At the bottom of the cake there's some frosting, so I decided to die cut that from some purple cardstock. You can color this in instead, but whenever I die cut, I really enjoy paper piecing, so that's what I did for all 10 of my cards. And you could just leave the cake white as well. I will be having something pop out of the cake, so you can make it more simple since the card has an interactive element to it. But I decided just to dress it up a little bit. For this ribbon, I die cut that from some turquoise cardstock. And then here from the last card, remember I thought I was going to use these pink roses, but I decided against it, so I decided to just add them onto this card. And I felt like my second tier needed some of that purple frosting, so I die cut that out again, and I'm just going to glue that on top of the second tier. And then I felt like I had to do something with those candles, so I die cut them from the same pink cardstock as those roses, and I'll just glue those on top of the white ones. So I had to do a lot of die cutting, but I really enjoy it. I like paper piecing. It's one of my favorite techniques. For the flames, I decided to just color those in with a yellow zig marker. And then I actually chopped those candles right off, but I will be gluing them back on in a second. Alright, so I'm taking this Lawn Fawn die, and I will have it linked down below. But you can use any kind of slider die you have. You can actually create this slit on your own, and I will have videos linked down below. If you don't have this die, you can check those out, and you can pretty much create the same interactive card here. But I'm going to use this die just because I have it. So I'm going to die cut a slit from the background, and then I'm also going to die cut these other two pieces. And I did cut that from some heavyweight cardstock since this will be the mechanism that pulls my sentiment out from the cake. And the way I fold this is I first fold it in and then I fold it out like an accordion, and I do that on both sides of the die. And then you're left with this flat piece, and then you're going to pinch that piece in, and that way you can slide it inside that slit there. So I'm also going to link down to some videos that better show how this die is used. This is a Lawn Fawn die, so I'm going to link Lawn Fawn's video. But basically, you can see kind of how it works. It goes up and down that slit, and then you can put it behind anything and have anything pop out behind it. I decided to pop out a sentiment. So I took some purple cardstock, I cut it down to fit behind my cake, and then I'm going to stamp out my sentiment. I chose "It's a Good Day for a Birthday," and I'm going to white heat emboss that. And I'm leaving a gap towards the top. That way I can add my candles back onto the sentiment. So I'll just heat set that, and then I can glue it onto my tab here. I'm using a lot of glue just to make sure that it won't fall off. And then I'm using the cake to position my sentiment. I have it towards the top of the slit, so I'm trying to position my cake to the bottom of the sentiment so that you can see the entire thing once it's pulled all the way up. I did trim a little bit off the top, but I still left a little bit of a gap for my candles. And in order for the mechanism to work, you have to pop up the image in front of it. So I'm going to add some foam dots here. I like that foam dots are a little more dimensional than foam tape. So it gives a little bit more wiggle room for my mechanism to slide up and down. So I'll just peel off those foam dot backings and pop that over my sentiment. I even added a few really small strips of foam dots on the sides of that sentiment. So here I'm just going to trim off a little more towards the top, just so that I can better hide it underneath the cake. And then I'm going to take my candles back and glue them towards the top of the sentiment. And that way, once the sentiment is below the cake, it looks like the candles are attached, but when you pull it up, the candles are actually attached to the sentiment, which I thought was really cute. And then you also have to add foam tape behind the mechanism, so it has some room to go up and down. But this time I just used foam tape, and I did pop it up onto a pink panel, which I cut to be a little bit smaller than an A2 card base. I just wanted to incorporate a little bit more pink to this card. So I'll add some double-sided tape and attach that to my card base. And that will pretty much complete card number 2. I'm just going to add the arrow that comes in the die set, just so that the recipient knows to pull that up. And I did trim that down quite a bit because I did still want it to be an A2 sized card. So you can still see the arrow, and that's how this card works. You just pull it up and the sentiment pops out of the cake, which I thought was super cute. You can have an animal pop out of the cake, really anything you want. I tried to stick to the kit contents as much as I could, so I decided to go for a sentiment. And then just to embellish this card, I'm taking some heart droplet embellishments from Trinity Stamps, and I'll just sprinkle a few of those around my cake. And that will officially complete card number 2. Here's a close-up. For card 3, I wanted to use the smaller background stamp from the stamp set. So I'm going to stamp that onto a white strip of cardstock, which I cut to 3 by 5.5 inches. And I'm also underneath that, I'm going to stamp out the sentiment, "Let's Party." I left a gap between the background stamp and the sentiment because I will be adding something above that. And then I'm also going to ink up the cake and the present stamp twice. I am using VersaFine ink, which is a pretty slow drying ink, so I decided to heat emboss it with some clear embossing powder. And this will also help me to stay inside the lines while I use my colored pencils. So I have this big jar of Wow clear embossing powder, and I've used quite a bit of it. I've had it for probably 2 years. So I'll just heat set that with my heat tool. And then I'm going to color these in with my colored pencils. But first I'm going to die cut the center of this background stamp with a circle die from my stash. I will be making that into a shaker. So that will be my window for my shaker. I'm also going to die cut out the presents and the cakes. I'll only be using 1 cake and then 2 of the presents. So I'll just show you a few of the images, how I colored them. And just like my Copics, I always start coloring with my darkest color, kind of mapping out the shadow areas. For this particular package, I decided on a center highlight, so I'm placing my shadows towards the edges, as well as underneath the bow that would naturally cast a shadow. I did pull in a 3rd color for this image, but for the rest, I just used 2 colors. And then for the bow, I decided to make it pink. Starting out with my darkest color, I added the darker color towards the knot of the bow. For the cake, I decided to make it white again with some colorful frosting. And for the frosting, I just used 1 color. And I did base off my colors from the sequin pack. The sequins were very colorful and rainbow, so I'm going to pretty much color these images in every color of the rainbow. So I'll just finish up that cake and then I'll work on the background. Inside the sequin pack were balloons and they were this exact color, so I decided to color in my 3 balloons with this kind of pinky purple color. And then for the really small images like the stars and the confetti, I only used 1 pencil. And I decided to color in this background stamp symmetrical, so the flowers on the top and bottom are both pink, and then the 2 flowers on the sides will be yellow. And I didn't bother to color in the balloons at the bottom because I knew something would be covering that. I'm actually going to place my cake and my 2 packages over that. And now I'm going to work on the sentiment behind my shaker window. I chose Make a Wish, and I stamped that onto a slightly larger circle. It's a little bit larger than the circle that I cut out from the background stamp. I'm going to clear heat emboss that. And that will just fit right behind this shaker window. So I'm going to add acetate behind it. And then I have in my stash this foam tape that's actually double mounted. It is by Uline, and I like to use it with my shaker cards so I don't have to double up my foam tape. It is very sticky, so I don't know if I would fully recommend it. I like it just because the price and the convenience of not having to double mount. So I'll still link it down below. And then I'm taking the sequin pack. I'm taking out a few of those large balloons. I wanted to make sure that I didn't put too many sequins in because I wanted to make sure that you can still see the sentiment. So I added my circle on top, and then I'm going to fill in those little corner gaps with a scrap piece of white paper just to make sure that those sequins don't pop out. And here is the completed shaker. I think I put just the right amount in, which never happens. As you know, I'm very stingy with sequins for some reason, so I never put enough in. But in this case, I actually didn't want to put too many in, since I did want you to see the sentiment. And then behind this panel, I thought it would help make it pop with a strip of pink cardstock on the right. And then just for a little fun, I decided to add a yellow strip to the left side. So I'll just trim off the excess. I'll peel off the rest of that foam tape, and then I'll also add some glue behind the paper and attach that to a black panel, which is cut to the size of an A2 card base. I thought the black would help all the colors stand out. So now I'm going to adhere my cake and my 2 packages. To finish off this card, I'm just going to sprinkle a few more sequins on the outside of my card. And whenever I work with sequins or any kind of embellishment, I tend to place them in a diagonal. So that's what I'm doing here. And I like how that looks, so I'll go ahead and attach everything with my art glitter glue. And this card's probably my favorite. I love the colors, and I love how the sequins match perfectly with the coloring. And I think that little yellow and pink strip is really fun. Alright, so now all I have to do is attach that to my A2 card base. Here I'm just showing you the shaker. I'm adding my double-sided tape to my card base this time. And then I will just take my black panel and adhere that right on top. And that will complete card number 3. Here's a close-up. For card 4, you can see I did some coloring and die cutting off camera. I did color them in with my colored pencils again, so I figured you didn't want to see that a third time. So I did it off camera, and I also die cut a silver plate and some pink ribbons from that fancy cake die. I actually won't be using the cake die for this card. I'm going to use these ribbons sort of as banners to add to the top of this stitched rectangle panel. I thought that turned out really cute. Another way to use the ribbons on the cake. So I'll just trim those out, and I will glue them to the top. And then instead of using the cake, I thought it would be fun to create a little cupcake scene with some colorful balloons and presents. So here I'm just going to glue down my pink banners. And then I'm going to work on my plate here. So I'm going to glue 2 of the presents towards the left and right of the plate. And then in between the presents, I'm going to glue my 3 cupcakes. And these cupcakes came from the background stamp. The presents and the stamped cake are the only ones that are separate. So the balloons and the cupcakes I had to die cut from that large background stamp. I decided to adhere 2 of the cupcakes, and then that center one I popped up with some foam tape. And then I decided to add foam tape behind the entire platter. And then you can see I added some balloons in the background. So I'm just going to arrange those, and then I'm going to adhere some of them flat, and then some of the balloons I will pop up with foam tape. And I still felt like this card was missing something. So I decided to take a cake from the stamp set, and I'm going to add that behind my 3 cupcakes. And I felt like the cake really completed the scene perfectly. It filled in that blank space between the cupcakes and the balloons. And I just love the colors. Again, I used the same colors I did on my last card. I thought about adding another banner to the top, but I decided just to stick with that pink one. And then I'm going to stamp out my sentiment. I chose Celebrate. I'll stamp that below my plate with some VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And then I decided to pop up this whole panel onto a stitched scalloped rectangle, which I die cut from some yellow striped pattern paper from my stash. This is a very bright and fun birthday card. I love how this one turned out. So I'll just attach that to my A2 card base, and then to finish this card off, I'm just going to sprinkle a few of the sequins. Again, the colors worked perfectly with the sequin pack, so I thought it would be fun to just scatter a few of those around. And that will complete card number 4. Here's a close-up. For card 5, I'm taking that background stamp again and a navy blue stitched rectangle panel. I'm going to place that inside my Misty, ink the background stamp with my Versamark ink, and stamp that down. And I'm going to sprinkle on some silver embossing powder. I love that you can create a really simple background just with some embossing powder. So I will do that for a few of my cards. And then I decided to also stamp out the smaller background stamp onto some white cardstock, which I die cut from a smaller stitch rectangle. I did ink it up with my VersaFine, and I will add clear embossing powder, but first I'm going to stamp the Make-A-Wish sentiment, and I wanted that to be silver embossed to coordinate with that navy blue background. So I made sure to only add the silver powder right over the sentiment, and then for the rest of the background, I will add clear embossing powder. So I'll just go ahead and heat set everything now. And I love how the silver heats up on the navy blue. I think it's really pretty. So So I'm going to bring in that white stitched rectangle, and I decided to add some distress ink to it. I'm going to start with Faded Jeans, and then I'm going to create a gradient with my Salty Ocean distress ink. Felix. Sorry. If you have a Siamese, you know that they are talkers. So I'm going to go back over with the Salty Ocean just to help everything blend together. And I am using a Picket Fence Studios blending brush here. Okay, and I felt like my sentiment was getting lost, so I'm going to go over that with a dry paper towel to try to remove that ink. And then just while I had my inks out, I decided to add a little bit of Faded Jeans to the edges of my navy blue panel. And I thought that looked really pretty. So at first I thought I wanted this panel in the center, but I will move it off to the top left. So here's that dry paper towel. I'm just going to go over all the embossing to try to help those images stand out again. I did die cut a white cake off camera. I decided just to use the cake, so I'm going to cut off the plate. And this time I left the cake completely white. I didn't do any extra die cutting. I thought the white looked very striking against the blue. So I'm going to attach part of that cake with my art glitter glue on top of the ink blended panel, and then I'll flip both of those over and add some foam tape. And then I'll just pop that up right over my navy blue. So this card was pretty quick to put together. I think it would be a fun boy baby shower card maybe, if you change the sentiment. So I'm just going to add some foam tape behind my navy stitched rectangle, and then I will attach that to my card base. And since this is such a simple design, I pulled in some navy blue pearls and gems from my stash. And just to dress up that cake a little bit, I decided to add some pearls to the center of those pom-poms on the cake. And then I added some navy blue gems around the Make-A-Wish sentiment. And that will complete card number 5. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you haven't yet already, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so you're notified when I post part 2, which should be in the next day or two. Again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!